almost 30 people on at the moment, and we're expecting more. So people may join as we go along. And I'm going to turn to Leslie, our marketing education jack of all trades, to give you a little bit of update on Zoom in case you don't do this all the time.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So this presentation is being recorded. If you have to step away or you want to share it with someone later, everyone who registered through our website will receive this recording. If you got the link from a friend and you didn't register, you can contact the Home Care Hospice and Palliative Care Alliance, and we will send you that link after the event. I think it takes me about a day to get it edited and posted back up. So without further ado, if you're not familiar with Zoom, there are a few things to kind of focus your attention on. The first is the chat panel. During this presentation, everybody will remain muted except for our presenters. But if during the course of the presentation you have a question or a comment or anything at all you'd like to share it in that chat panel. There are two different choices in chat. You can share to everyone, which I highly recommend, so we can all see your thoughts and your concerns. But you can also just send a private chat to anyone in the meeting, including the speakers. We do have probably 35 to 40 participants on today. So when we do have a discussion, it's kind of hard to hear what one person is saying. You can unmute yourself and make yourself known at that point as well. But the chat panel works a little bit better. Let's see, what else would you need to know? There's a reaction panel. If you like what you heard, you can use that to have a happy face or clapping. But if you came in late and you weren't aware of this one feature, at the top of your dashboard is the white checkerboard, or I guess tic-tac-toe board, and the word view. Select that for speaker view so that you see the slide, and the speaker will be a little bit bigger and you'll be able to see her, or you can pick gallery view, in which case you see all of the little boxes that have their screen on. Okay, and you can go back and forth with that too. It's not a one and done. And that's about it, Janice. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to private message me. And I changed my name to Leslie. And that's about it.
Thanks, Leslie. Well, everyone, I'm really pleased to have you all here today. And this event is really in honor of National Healthcare Decisions Day, which happens every year on April 16th, the day after taxes, because what we can count on in life is death and taxes. So if you haven't heard about National Healthcare Decisions Day, there's a website devoted to it. It's now part of the Conversation Project. There's a lot of great resources, so feel free to look up that website if you have time. And we thought we would honor it this year by hosting this session on death cafes. Some of you have participated, some of you have hosted, but I know that Marsha Filion, the executive director of the Hospice Help Foundation, does these events regularly. And she and I spoke earlier this year about giving you an overview of what it's like and a toolkit so you can use these yourself in your own community. And she's going to be joined by Keliane Totten from Granite VNA. Am I saying that right? You'll hear a little bit more, but I want to turn this right over to Marsha Filion to get us started. And Marsha is a member of the Home Care Hospice and Palliative Care Alliance with the Hospice Help Foundation. They do some great work, and she's someone I've worked with for the past several years. So I'm really pleased to welcome you, Marsha.
Well, great. It's so nice to be here, Janice, and to be with all of you. And, you know, it took a pandemic to get us to collaborate again. It was worth it, in my opinion. So yes, I'm Marsha Filion. I'm with Hospice Help Foundation. And what we do is we help hospice patients who are struggling with poverty. Let me see if I can advance the slides. There we go. So we provide essentials for hospice patients, like the things that I've listed here that will directly improve their comfort and their quality of life. We work with many hospices throughout New Hampshire, many of you probably we have a partnership with, and even further afield and actually across the nation when people hear about us. Because what we do is something that only one of two other organizations in the nation really do. So we love New Hampshire. It's our focus, and are thrilled to be able to support the community here. So the other thing that we do is we provide opportunities for members of the community, usually here in the Seacoast, we're based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to talk about death and dying and lay a foundation for good death. It's, the conversation that we're all trying to get people to have, and it's a struggle. So we've tried many different approaches, and these are some of samples of past opportunities that we have presented. But the star of our show is the Death Cafe. As Janice said, we've been providing these since 2015, which is when our founder, Janet Prescott, launched the first one. We've been having them ever since on a quarterly basis. And I will say that it's part of a global movement. So death cafes are now taking place throughout the world. There have been over 12,000 death cafes. And I'll say that they really took off since the pandemic. They were started in September 2011 by a gentleman named John Underwood. And he launched them really, as it says here on their website, to increase awareness of death, to help people make the most of their finite lives. And what we've seen is that this is truly the case. It's a great chance for people to learn about end-of-life options, but mostly people come away really uplifted by being thoughtful about their own mortality. If you are thinking that a death cafe is something that would work in your community, I would really recommend that you check out this website because it's packed with resources. There are places where you can just go and talk about your experience and see what other people have experienced in their version of a death cafe. It's also a great place to promote your death cafe. And right now, while things are virtual, you could be getting attendees from anywhere in the world who come across your event on the website. So this is one of our flyers. And as you will see, we have leaned into the playful approach of a death cafe. They're not for everyone. They definitely put some people off, but we have found that as many people as they might put off because of the sort of upfront, unusual approach, we found that people often will come because their curiosity is piqued. And I really love them because when they do come to these events, they're really open to an experience. It's definitely not sort of like a sit down and take notes type of thing. They really don't know what to expect. And so they're open to anything. And I've just seen some real magic take place because, I think because of the special formatting of the Death Cafe. Now, I will say that these are really participant-led discussions where you're coming together in groups and you're really, the focus is really on the discussion and the cake, but the discussion is really important. And there's no agenda. We're not trying to hand out flyers. We don't have anything particular that we want to educate people on. It's really a chance for people to just come together and share whatever they want. And I think it really has sort of a special appeal because of that open structure. I will really emphasize what Death Cafe is not, and that is it is definitely not a bereavement or grief support for people. And we say that several times when we host these Death Cafes. It's not set up to help people in that way. We do sometimes have a social worker or a specialist on hand if there is someone who needs some one-to-one help. But again, because these are really sort of discussions that are without an agenda and without any experts there to sort of provide information and counseling, we try to make it super clear right off the bat that we can't help people if they have these kinds of needs. It's not a source for answers, which I really love because it would be difficult to find the experts to bring in to provide those kinds of answers for everyone, especially when you're just getting general members of the public coming and you don't really know what their questions are, what their experiences or key concerns are. not a place to sell your services. And this has been one that we have seen attempted and just really not work. There are definitely points in the beginning when people are signing in, and at the end when you can have flyers out and you can answer people's questions about hospice or about whatever your business might be. But in the groups, which take up the most amount of time, the conversation really has to follow where the people want it to go. So it's not ideal if you want to talk about hospice the whole time to sort of force that on the group of people that are sitting at your table. And it's not a drag, you know, I would say definitely bring the tissues, which I always forget. Bring the tissues, there will be tears, but again, people really come away truly uplifted, whether it's relief at finally being able to broach these subjects, or just, you know, being reminded that life is short and that you need to make the most of it, and we won't be around forever. So, you know, seize the day and appreciate what you have now. And so what I will do now that I've told you what a death cafe is not, is just go through some of the basics and the structure and a few of the guidelines, and that will be it. We'll try to keep it short so that Keliane can talk about their version of the death cafes, and we can answer some questions. And also, you know, we would love to be able to give you a chance to maybe experience an unofficial death cafe. We're gonna give it a try and see if it works with this group. So here are some of the basics. Venue is really essential. Our first death cafe, we had it in my favorite coffee shop. Great coffee, great food. We were situated right next to the coffee bean grinder, and it was just impossible. We also had a really large group of people, and because we didn't have the space to break into smaller groups, we had about 15 people in a circle. And like, especially when that bean grinder was going, you definitely could not hear, well, you know, barely what the person next to you was saying, let alone what the person at the other end of the group was saying. And, you know, people are really opening up their hearts and talking about something that scares them, or that they feel strongly about and haven't been able to, you know, broach this important subject with loved ones. So, you know, to have them need to shout it across a room in a public area is not ideal. So definitely be thoughtful about your venue. We've had a few of these in hospices and had great attendance by hospice staff and not such great attendance by other members of the public. For us, the greatest success has really been to have these in libraries where you can have people who are just browsing pop in, you know, because their curiosity has been piqued by that flyer. The libraries have been really great at helping to promote the event through social media and to their much larger audience than what we have. And, you know, there you've got the quiet and you've got the space to break out into smaller groups as well. Time, we've learned some good lessons about timing. And I would say death cafes are much more popular in cold and rainy weather. It's really hard to get people to dedicate, you know, a couple of hours when it's beautiful and sunny and warm outside. On the other hand, a lot of people who come to these death cafes are older. And so we do try to schedule them during daylight hours because it's harder for people in the nighttime to drive. Like seniors are more reluctant to do nighttime driving. We have found with in-person death cafes that about an hour and a half works perfectly. And I'll talk a little bit about the structure later on, but generally an hour and a half works really well. With virtual events, we found that an hour is really perfect. And after that, things tend to stretch a little bit. Facilitators, I'll go into facilitators in a couple of slides as well, but just briefly, this is a great way to get volunteers on board because there's no educational aspect. You know, the key role of a facilitator is to just make sure the conversation is going and that people feel comfortable and that no one is really dominating that discussion. So, you know, this is where our team of volunteers loves to be able to help us out. And I'm sure that you could get your volunteers on board as well. We have a couple of experts We have a medical director from one hospice and a grief specialist as well. But really their job is just the same, and it's to keep that conversation going and to make sure that people feel comfortable sharing. Food, you'd best have cake. We found the level of response increases with the quality of the food you're providing, and really, can you blame them? The initial idea behind these death cafes was to provide a really special and almost celebratory opportunity for people to talk about this very difficult subject. And if you are able to invest some time and money, if needed, if you can, into providing some really tasty cakes, people will love that, and they do generally appreciate it. You know, I've tried to skimp with munchkins, and I would say, you know, it's not a munchkin audience. You know, again, if you can get a volunteer to bake a cake, well, that will be a talking point, and it will make it a really special occasion. Tissues, I'll mention them again, if only for my own benefit. There will be tears, and I have just been so amazed and moved by the stories that people have been willing to share. And, you know, there have been times when we've just passed around the box of tissues and everyone has taken one. It's great to have them. You don't always need them, but, you know, it's great to have them. And then I've got this extra one, resources, in blue, because it's sort of the way that we cheat with death cafes. We know there's no real educational component, and you're not supposed to really provide information, but it's really hard for me to do that. So I love to provide people with book lists or great movies that have come out recently. I also have an end of life action sheet that I just, it's a really ugly Word document, which is why I haven't put it up on the screen, but it essentially includes like a link to advanced directives. It includes a space for people to put down a name of a durable power of attorney, just to keep them thinking about it and engaged with these ideas, and to give them something to walk away with. It includes a few good books, including On Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, and it provides some space for people to list like 3 things that they really think would be important to them for their end of life preferences that they would want to share with loved ones. So, you know, I view these as an introduction to the subject and a start to the conversation. You know, for some people, it's like a tipping point. They've been worried about talking about it. And then, you know, these resources can sort of be a launch pad for further exploration, something to take away with them and remind them that they had this and that they need to be talking about this with other people. So structure is very basic. You know, I provide an introduction, and that can take up to 10 minutes at most. And that really talks about the importance of having these conversations. And then I introduce our facilitators, and then I go over the guidelines, which I'll do with the next slide. It's very basic. And then people will break into groups for about 60 minutes. And these will be smaller groups. Usually group size, you know, 6 to 10 people is ideal. Small, but not too small. And we usually have a facilitator lead each group. And in that small group, we have the facilitator go over the guidelines one more time. And then they simply start the session by saying, what brings you to this death cafe? And then people go around the room and they share that. And then the conversation is just open to, you know, is open to continue after people have had their chance to go around. And it's really amazing to see where it leads. After that group session, we'll have like a 10-minute warning before things close up, and then we reconvene for a recap. And this is truly optional. People can really just head home after the group discussion. But we like to have people come together again and then share their highlights or their key takeaway from their experience. And, you know, each group will have a really very different conversation. So I really like to give people that opportunity to see what other people talked about and to maybe learn from their key takeaway. And then at the end is another sheet that I've worked into our sessions, but it's definitely another option that you don't need to include. And that's, we try to set aside about 10 minutes so that members of the audience can talk to our experts and ask them questions that are really specific to them. And that way it frees them up from having to worry about these questions during the session. They know they can ask something that is more specific to their own personal needs and interests at the end. And it doesn't sort of derail the conversation that's taking place. And here are the guidelines. And after this, once you know all this, you'll be able to start your own death cafe. It's that simple. So the guidelines are really, really basic. Share airtime. This one may be challenging, just make sure that everyone gets a chance to talk. Again, because it's so hard for people to have these conversations. I really am sort of hardcore about making sure everyone gets a chance to do as much talking as they need to. The hardest one for anyone with a hospice background, speak for yourself, not for others or for the group. So when we have had hospice staff, bless you all, talking about, experiences and obviously not naming names, but talking about patients that you're worried about. But it's so important to make this about your personal experience, not your experience as a member of a hospice team or any other profession. This is about your relationship with death and dying, your fears, your concerns. Everyone is coming to the table and to this group as an equal, as someone who will at some point die. And this is your chance to share your thoughts with the others in the group. So we ask people to listen first before talking, just again to make sure that everyone is getting their chance to talk. Confidentiality is an obvious one. What is said in Death Cafe stays in Death Cafe, even if you bump into someone on the street the next day. And this is a real key one. Everyone in the group shares responsibility for a successful experience. This is a participant-led discussion, and the onus is not on the facilitator, but on the participants to make sure that the conversation is happening. And this one is really good to drill into people when you are in Zoom, because we have the inclination to sort of kick back and let everyone else do the talking and sort of turn your screen off and drink your coffee and have a snack. But in Death Cafe, everyone in the group shares a responsibility. So if you're a participant, you need to be talking as well. And as I said before, I've seen real magic when people step up and share that responsibility. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for the chance to talk about these. And there's my contact info. If you have any questions, I'd be really happy to hear from you. And happy to help you set these up for your community. And now I'm really thrilled to pass this over to Keliane Totten, who's with Granite VNA, and she is the Chief Officer of Community Engagement. And their organization has a slightly different take on these death cafes. So Keliane, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. I just want to confirm, can you all see the screen that I'm sharing? Thumbs up. Okay. It switched monitors on me when I shared my screen. It flipped to a whole different monitor than what Marsha was on. So I just wanted to make sure.
You're not on slideshow though, Keliane.
I can't. So I have a technical issue with mine that was before. If I do that, it all goes dark.
Okay.
So I just will share, I am with Granite VNA. We are formerly Concord Regional VNA and Central New Hampshire VNA and Hospice. April 1st, our organizations merged into one new entity. We continue to be a not-for-profit organization as well. So I just wanted to share that context around it was promoted and I was with one organization. I am very much with the same organization. We are just moving into a new phase together going forward. Let's see. So for the history of our Death Cafe, we started in 2013, and this was very much an effort coming from our community benefit program offerings. And I do think that's important. So in being a service provider of in-home home care and hospice services, this actually was generated and came from a place of community benefit programming. And one of the focus areas of content and gaps that we recognized in our community was really needing to initiate more conversations around living and dying in our communities, and what does that look like. And for years, we had been trying in various ways to provide education around end-of-life planning in more formal ways with regards to the advance directive and the document and having a power of attorney. And really had actually come across a New York Times article in 2013 talking about the international movement towards death cafes, and it sparked our interest as something to try in a way that we felt would work locally and in what our community was ready for. So you will notice that nuance of we don't necessarily at this point promote it in the way of calling it an outright death cafe, though I'll take you on our journey. So when we first launched, we named our cafe the Dying to Talk Cafe. And so outside of, I think, the variation on our name, and over time, some of the topics we infused, it very much really is a death cafe. There was a greater comfort as an organization in the way we were putting this forward at the time to start with Dying to Talk and to go from there. So we began this effort in 2013, and we partnered with True Brew Barista, which is an excellent coffee place. And also there's a bar here in Concord. And we collaborated with the location at the Gibson's bookstore. Which was a great, I would talk about sites a little bit as well. So I think important to think about is ADA accessible, large enough to comfortably seat participants with tables and chairs that can move. And I would echo what Marsha shared about, go and visit the site ahead of time and listen to the noises and think about where you can sit. The very first cafe that we offered was in the True Brew location. That was a coffee shop and a bar, and we were doing it in the evening. And so our first go of it was sort of in a back dark corner of a bar. So it was evening and the lights had dimmed, and that made it a bit more challenging to really communicate with one another. From there is when we moved to the more typical coffee shop type location and had some specific tables that we would reserve. And we would also serve cake and coffee and tea for our cafes as well. When we first started our cafes, they were offered on a regular day of every month. So it was always going to be the fourth Wednesday of each month in the evening. There was no charge for people to come to our programming. No one needed to register or RSVP ahead of time. We wanted to remove all of those barriers so that people felt they could be comfortable just dropping in and checking it out. And we continue to try to work in that manner today as well. So we did partner, so as our community benefit programming team, we partnered with our spiritual care and our social work staff from our hospice team, and really were able to garner comfort with the topic and in facilitating dialogue around some, at times, which can be challenging conversations. And so for us, that was a model that worked well, and we continue to partner with our community benefit staff, which is really health educators like myself by profession, and then really working with social work and spiritual care to sort of complement what our goal is in offering that. Over the years, our participation has really ranged. There might be some months where we have 2 people. There might be some in our earliest days as well. We were having up to 14 people come regularly to our cafes. So I'll share a little bit. So the purpose of our Dying to Talk Cafe similar to the Death Cafe. It's really to provide an open, respectful, confidential space where individuals can come and discuss death, find meaning, and reflect on what's important to them as a person. And I would, in agreement with Marsha as well, so the facilitators of the program are participating and responding to questions, but from their own personal perspective, not as a professional in the discipline or in the profession they're serving with our organization. And really the aim and further goals are to be able to facilitate that conversation without any expectation from the participants and what they may be sharing. The goal is to create a comfortable and informal, which is also really important, and respectful environment where people can talk openly and be candid about death. And our goal also was to have it act as a springboard for a deeper awareness, consideration, and an investigation for end of life for each person and what that might mean. Again, our greater goal with regards to our community benefit programs and what we were looking to try to meet in the community also is that conversations about end of life can lead to an improved quality of life. And also, end-of-life discussions can be associated with less aggressive medical care near death. And aggressive, care can decrease that quality of life, or worse, on the bereavement adjustment as well. So there were some other higher-end goals that we worked towards regularly in our profession as a home health and hospice organization. And we felt that this was sort of one tactic that could help us really increase conversations and help with people's comfort around living and dying as well. So on this particular slide is really just some different examples of how we have promoted the program over the years. I will share our target age group for this really is around age 45 plus. We were very much looking to pull from a younger demographic to help, again, change the way our communities think about death and dying and move that needle up to not only, thinking about it when you feel you are at that point, but really think about it at any point in your life and become more comfortable in those conversations with parents or with loved ones as well. And so I would just share some of the variations that may stand out here are we played with some different ways to offer it. So initially, and I would say for the first 6 or 7 months, we had strong participation without any topic and for people to drop in. Then we started to have some, we sort of stalled and it became a little bit stagnant. And so we looked at some suggestions from some evals that our participants were completing. And from there, we made some adjustments and tried offering it with discussion topics. So there would be a discussion topic and there would be some questions in line with that theme. But again, there were no expectations around what people may share based on those responses. It was just to give people a sense of comfort and what might we talk about specifically at a cafe like this. And so some of those topics that we shifted to were bucket lists. So that had come out at that point in time, and it was sort of around the theme of bucket lists. Another was, what would you want your obituary to read? Another topic was talking to a loved one about death, because that had a common element through many of our cafes as well, is sometimes what we all may experience with people we care about. We are comfortable to talk about death, but perhaps the people we need to know or want to know are not as comfortable in reciprocating or participating in that conversation. And so one of our cafes was around that topic as well. Another was simply good deaths. And again, that's a really open conversation and dialogue and very different for me than it might be for Marsha and for Janice, very much individual based in what we would learn. And so I would say also, as we shifted and made it fresh, we regained participation in our cafes. And at that point, it was still offered monthly as well. There came a point where we were really looking at efforts we were putting in and feedback from participants, and we did move to a quarterly offering of our Dying to Talk Cafe. And that's sort of been our sweet spot. And where we are currently, I think it's our goal to stay with quarterly at this point in time. Would love to have a demand and cause to increase. I think as we serve a broader geography, there might be an opportunity for us to have 2 simultaneous Dying to Talk cafes, but they would both probably be quarterly for the areas that they serve as well. I would also share just having the cafe as a spot. We've done some different things with books as a discussion topic. So Being Mortal being one of them. You can also see an example here. We did a community game night, and you can see it was in April. So it was around Make Decision Day as well. And we did oh my gosh, I'm going to forget, My Gift of Grace, the card game. So we did that in multiple locations actually for the cafe that evening. Again, it just creates spirited conversations for different people to contemplate what they want in end of life. And then back to current state, we've come full circle. So we are looking to reinvigorate our Dying to Talk Cafe in September is when we will come back to it. So we did offer one in May, this past May, at the Hooksett Public Library, which was virtual. We are looking to hopefully be in person at the Concord Public Library. So interestingly as well, as Marsha has found libraries to be a great location to hold these, we have had that same experience also. And so we find that in other programming in addition to this. You'll also note that these are offered midday versus the evening. So I think what we're reconsidering is really our goal certainly was age 45 and trying to get and we were really creative in how we reached out to different employee assistance programs and chambers and really tried to promote this to a younger demographic. But what we consistently found for an age group were really people who expressed and who told us outright that they would prefer a program that was offered during the day. And so you can see that we've shifted our programming to be midday or early afternoon. And are partnering with libraries, still offering the coffee, still offering the cake, as well as an important part of really keeping people comfortable. And I have this quote that I like, and it was actually from the article from 2013, and I found it for today. And it's a quote from Mr. Underwood, who was an organizer of a death cafe in London. And he says, "There's a superstition that if you talk about death, you invite it closer. But the consumption of food is a life-sustaining process. Cake normalizes things." And I think that's why I always found when we were first looking at this, I was like, gosh, the cake, they keep talking about the cake. And when I just came back to this now, it's so true that it sort of sets focus on what you're eating. It relaxes you. You start to feel like you're in a comfortable setting, enjoying good food with good people and talking about something that may be more comfortable to talk about with people you don't know than with people you know well. And I think these cafes are a great place for people to start those conversations in a setting that is open and accepting. And I would agree with Marsha as well. So there is no steering of services and referrals and making those connections during those cafes at all. So if someone's specifically looking for something like that, it's usually we can touch base after the cafe to talk about that, but move on for the group discussion. And I do think that's an important piece as a provider of the services that I think that's why it's helpful. It has sat within our community benefit programs and offerings, coming really from a different place as well. And then I'll lastly just share my contact information. I'm happy to answer questions, talk about our reboot. I work closely with Jen Brechtel, whom some of you may know, and then certainly our hospice team of social workers and spiritual care providers are a part of our facilitators as we look to come back in the fall. That hopefully is helpful, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Keliane. And Janice, did you see any questions in the chat? I haven't had a chance to do that yet.
There is a comment in the chat from Beata that they also have done death cafes, and that it has morphed into an end-of-life cafe because it's a little less scary for some.
And as you mentioned, Janice, I would add that if you don't think a death cafe or a dying to talk is right for your community, then I would really encourage you to check the Conversation Project, because it's a similar thing, encouraging participants to have this conversation with family and loved ones and to start thinking about end-of-life preferences. And their approach is to have like a booklet that you go through, and it's much more sort of practical and fact-based. So that might be more helpful to your members. And you can also certainly have both. You know, we're definitely thinking of providing a conversation project type of event for our community as well. And that is based in Boston, actually. And I think it is linked to Atul Gawande. I think he's involved with that as well.
There's a question for you now. Do people tend to repeat attending regularly, or are most attendees coming for just one time?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't know about you, Keliane, but we have people who've been coming to the death cafes since 2015. And they've been really annoyed with me for not having them during the pandemic. So it's definitely, you know, it's not a one and done type of thing. It's really, you learn something every time you have it. And the conversations, because they're participant led, you know, I can talk to somebody about a very philosophical exploration of death and dying, or it can be really about how difficult it is to have that conversation with loved ones. You just never know what you're going to get. And for me, that's part of just how wonderful they are.
I would say it's interesting. Our attendance has almost been cyclical. So I think we would have regulars for a period of time. And then in all honesty, I think based on who we had, they almost moved into other phases of exploration. And I think that's when we found ourselves again looking to reinvent and identify new participants as well. There have been some consistent attendance, also just from some of our agency's volunteers who had further interest in exploring the topic and wanting to attend our Dying to Talk cafes over time as well, pretty consistently there.
Couple more questions for you, and I see that Leslie just posted the link in the chat for the Conversation Project fact sheet, which Marsha mentioned and someone asked for. Keliane, are you able to recall or share the name of the 2013 article you referenced?
I can, and I can type this into the chat after too. So it's "Death Be Not Caffeinated, Over Cup Groups Face Taboo." And I can type that in here, I think.
Great. I haven't seen that before. Also, Marsha, would it be appropriate to provide advanced directive forms in the resource packet?
Yes, we've definitely done that. And people have been thrilled to receive them. You know, we haven't walked people through them during the Death Cafe, but they were happy to take them at the end. And we've had different sessions on helping people navigate those packets as well.
You're offering a lot by doing that, I think.
You think too much?
No, no, I think if people come to these death cafes, they're looking for information, and even though they're not asking specifically for the forms, I think to give it to them and let them decide whether they're ready to pursue that or not is great.
Yeah, and I would echo as well, if people haven't checked out the Conversation Project, it really is, there's excellent resources, there's materials that you're able to access at no cost to help enhance even other educational opportunities that you might be offering or as leave behinds for this group. That has been super helpful. And we've also used 5 Wishes as another means for conversation and just a different pathway to helping identify your wants.
Mhm. It's great. Thanks, Keliane.
Yeah, I think it's great to offer all these different opportunities because you never know what's going to hook someone. So, and for us, that's why we really love our death cafes and our slightly irreverent takes on them, because you just get people that who would normally never be attracted to this kind of conversation or the discussion. You know, they're just like, oh my gosh, there's a Grim Reaper on that. I'll check it out. And we have been pretty successful at getting young people, you know, not always. And we always are trying to make sure that people, you know, 18 and older are informed about these cafes and that they know that they are open to attending them. But, you know, it's harder to get younger people, obviously, for obvious reasons. And, but we have found that irreverence is really helpful on that front.
So have you both found that people come primarily because they want to talk about their own wishes or because they anticipate having to work with a family member and they want to know more about how to have that conversation?
I think I would say for our cafes, it's more tipped in the wanting to talk about their own, and it might be that no one in their family will talk about it with them. So we have seen some of that, and I will say too, we have had people come who had a terminal diagnosis and who were in a different place of exploration and really looking for some specific information as well. So I think from a facilitator perspective, also just being prepared for how that can be handled within the group dynamic. Before letting it turn into a support group or a referral setting or problem solving in the death cafe conversation. Absolutely appropriate to follow up after and make sure they have connections to resources and services that they may be looking for. That was something that came up a bit in our first year for some of the clients.
And we had a similar experience. We had a woman who had decided to discontinue any treatment. She just wanted the cancer to run its course. And it was really great to have her in the group because I think people had never even considered that that was an option before. And I felt so honored to be in that group because they were so respectful. They gave her the time to explain her viewpoint. You know, I mean, it could have been very easy that someone would have disagreed with her, just been like, you're crazy, just go to the doctor. And you know, people really listened, and she felt so valued because she hadn't really found a doctor who was responsive to her wishes. So it was really meaningful to her to be able to have that opportunity to talk about her wishes.
Not seeing any other questions right now. Someone said, so this isn't a heavy metal gathering for rockers? I missed that before.
Oh, and I just saw the question that people were asking about assisted dying. And
Yeah,
for us, this is a hot topic. It's here in New Hampshire, it's like the #1 question, especially because we are so close to Maine.
Mhm.
And again, it has been hard because our job is not to provide answers. So we
Mhm.
provide resources and then try to, you know, talk in a more deep way or have a deeper exploration about what it is that is spurring their interest in that subject or in that approach. And in that case, it's a great chance to educate people about hospice, because, we've seen that the number one fear is really pain management or really suffering. And then the other one is being a burden to family members. So when we can talk to people about, what hospice does without making that the whole point of the conversation, but, providing that little bit of information, it's been well received and appreciated.
Thank you.
So I don't know if we have time to go into a breakout session. What do you think, Janice?
Do you want to just do it with the whole group like you were initially thinking?
Great. So
Yeah.
what we thought would be fun, and I don't know, I mean, we are just sort of brainstorming this, is to give you the chance to be part of a death cafe if you want to. So I would say that I will just start as the facilitator, I guess, in this role. I'll start with what brought me, and then if you would like to join in and say what your interest is in the Death Cafe, I would really welcome you to have this sort of experimental mock Death Cafe experience, just to see how it is, and you can try it out. So what I usually say when I start these is I just go for broke and I tell them the whole story. So I was 7 months pregnant when my mom was, when I found out that my mom had a terminal disease and she was given about 3 months left to live. I lived in a different country, and it was a real shock to me. And she was a hospice volunteer. So I wasn't sure I was going to see her again because I couldn't fly over when I was that pregnant, when I was that close to the due date. So she was still alive after the birth of my son. And I came back to spend what we thought would be our final summer together. And to honor her, I trained to be a hospice volunteer. And ever since I took that training, I have not left the hospice world, as I'm sure so many of you had the same experience. You can't unsee or unlearn your knowledge about end of life and the difference you can make and how important these conversations are and how life affirming it can be. And so, we've been so lucky that she has outlived her diagnosis by a decade now. And what I've worked really hard to do, and what these death cafes have been so helpful for me with, is never taking her for granted and never taking our time together. Always appreciating it and appreciating everything that I have, really, and just making sure that I make the most of my life. And the death cafes have just been such a great reminder about what's important. It's why I love having them. I've had the most important conversations with people in death cafes, and I'm just so grateful to be part of this community and to be able to help people have these discussions as well. So would anyone else like to share what brought them here today? Oh, go on, Keliane.
I can share. What brings me to a death cafe actually is connected to the way I grew up. I actually feel really positive and have had a strong family connection. So I am lucky to come from a family where on my mom's side, they are French Canadian, and there are 13 of them. And I grew up spending those were like my best friends, and I had no idea there was life beyond that as well. But it's sort of like in this group of women, 10 aunts as well. It was almost like always positive. And that was sort of my mom's take as well. So very strong, very surviving. And I always sort of, as on my dad's side actually, is like unhealthy lifestyle and behaviors. And so there were some things in play with like my Nana, right? And it was sort of like always like, oh, it's going to be fine. Oh, let's not worry about it. We would like hop over it and skip over it. And as I started to work in community health and with a home care organization, truthfully, I did not fully explore these conversations and my own feelings around some of the things that I had seen or not really gotten to talk about or explore, and realized how meaningful that was for me and how it has really helped me, even in how I handle those conversations now with my mom and with my dad, and looking back at some of the times with grandparents, and like in a different connection and in a different way, how important bringing joy at that point in some of my family members' lives really was, and wanting to make sure I'm sharing what's important to me with my family, and not sort of like leaving it to luck or for someone else. But just, it's really helped me have a deeper appreciation for the conversations, and it's challenged me personally as well to bring that into my personal life in a family that was less comfortable with it, in a lot of them.
Thank you so much for sharing. Would anyone else, I would say, just unmute and begin.
So I'll do one more because we're going to run out of time, Marsha. And I will ask the group to write down, even though we don't have time to go around and ask everyone what brought them here today, that everyone write that down so they won't forget as we leave this session today. But I would tell you, Marsha, if I went to a death cafe today, I would say what brought me is COVID-19, because I have a binder full of articles and forms and booklets like 5 Wishes and Conversation Project worksheets and all of that I have told my children I will fill out so that they will know what I want. Have I done it? No. But I would say to you that COVID-19 has made that a more pressing issue for everyone at all ages, but also when you're in the over 65 category that we keep seeing people dying, you know. So I think that's got to have an impact on why people might come right now and the importance of doing this.
And I think you're in great company, Janice. Well, I'm pretty sure that last year when I checked the Death Cafe website, they had said that they had had about 6,000 death cafes across the globe. And I was really floored to check it this time and see that it had gone up to 12,000. So, I mean, I think that over the course of 1 year, there's tremendous interest in having these conversations. And, you know, I'm sad that it has taken a pandemic, but it's great that people are having these discussions and thinking about it and being motivated to talk to their loved ones about their preferences now.
Yes. Yeah. So with that, I think we have to close, but I can't thank you and Keliane, both of you. I can't thank you enough for doing this. You did a great job as far as I'm concerned. And I hope everyone that has been with us for this past hour got something out of this, and that you will look for the recording and share it with other staff and colleagues and anyone who might find this helpful. There is some more conversation in the chat about Vermont having the medical aid in dying option as well, and some issues there, and a lot of thank yous.
Well, thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity. I encourage you all to have a death cafe. They're really wonderful. So thanks for your time and attention. And thank you, Keliane.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.